Frozen despair. The storm howled like a beast, its icy claws tearing at Captain Alex Reed's survival suit. Snow blinded his vision, and the freezing air burned his lungs with every breath. His ship had crashed hours ago, maybe more. Time felt meaningless in this endless white wasteland. All Alex knew was that he had to keep moving. If he stopped, the cold would claim him, and his name would join the long list of forgotten souls lost to the void of space. Each step was a battle. The snow was thick and heavy, and his legs felt like lead. His boots crunched loudly against the frozen ground, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the roaring wind. He clutched a small thermal scanner, its screen cracked but still functional. The readings were bleak. No signs of life, no shelter. "Keep going," Alex muttered to himself, his voice trembling as frost clung to his beard. His fingers, numb despite the heated gloves, clutched at the straps of his backpack. Inside, he carried the last remnants of his survival gear: a nearly empty thermal pack, a knife, and a flare gun with a single shot. The crash replayed in his mind like a broken recording. One moment, he'd been charting a distant system. The next, alarms blared, and the ship plummeted through the atmosphere of this frozen planet. His crew. Alex swallowed hard, pushing away the thought. He had no time to mourn. Survival demanded all his focus. The blizzard showed no mercy. Snow piled against his legs, making each step harder. His breath came in shallow gasps, visible in the frosty air. Then his foot slipped on a patch of ice, and he fell face first into the snow. Pain shot through his arms as he caught himself. "No, no, get up," he whispered, but his body screamed in protest. Exhaustion was winning. He lay there for a moment, the cold seeping into his bones. Was this it? Was this how his story would end? A soft, flickering light caught his eye. It was faint, barely visible through the storm, but it was there. A glimmer of hope. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be a settlement? A rescue team? He forced himself to his knees, then to his feet. The light pulsed again, like a beacon calling him. It was distant, but it was something. Alex gritted his teeth and pushed forward, driven by sheer desperation. The journey toward the light felt endless. The wind bit at his exposed face, and his legs threatened to give out with every step. But the light grew brighter, clearer. It wasn't a natural glow. There was something alien about it. It shifted in color, from icy blue to soft green, like it was alive. As he drew closer, the storm seemed to weaken, the howling wind quieting to a low murmur. The light emanated from a large, jagged structure half buried in the snow. It wasn't a building, but it wasn't natural either. It looked like a crystal formation, tall and sharp, glowing faintly in the darkness. Alex approached cautiously, his instincts on high alert. His scanner beeped weakly, picking up faint energy readings from the structure. It was warm here, warmer than anywhere else he'd been since the crash. He extended a trembling hand toward the glowing surface. Before he could touch it, movement caught his eye. A shadow flickered across the light, quick and fluid. His heart pounded in his chest. "Hello," he called out, his voice hoarse. No response. The shadow moved again, circling him, just out of reach. Alex tightened his grip on the knife in his pocket. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, though his own fear betrayed him. The shadow stepped into the light, and Alex's breath caught. It was humanoid, but not human. The figure stood taller than him, its skin translucent and glowing faintly like the crystal structure. Its eyes, large and golden, stared at him with an intensity that made him shiver, not from fear, but something else entirely. The beam tilted its head, studying him. Alex raised his hand slowly, trying to appear non-threatening. I'm a survivor. My ship crashed. I mean no harm." The beam didn't speak but moved closer, its movement smooth and almost graceful. It raised a hand, its fingers long and delicate, and pointed to Alex's chest. He flinched but held his ground. The being touched his survival suit, and warmth spread through his body, chasing away the cold in an instant. Alex gasped. The warmth was unlike anything he'd ever felt, gentle yet powerful, like standing in sunlight after a long winter. The being's eyes softened, and Alex realized it wasn't hostile. It had saved him. The storm began to howl again, as if angry at their brief reprieve. The being stepped back, motioning for Alex to follow. It turned and glided toward the crystal structure, disappearing inside. Alex hesitated only for a moment. Whatever this creature was, it had saved his life, and the storm wouldn't spare him a second chance. He took a deep breath and followed, stepping into the unknown. Inside the crystal structure, the air was warm and still. The glow pulsed softly, illuminating the space in hues of blue and green. Alex turned to thank the being, but it was already gone, its shadow vanishing into the depths of the structure. For the first time since the crash, Alex felt something other than fear, hope. Whatever this place was, it held answers. And maybe, just maybe, it held the key to his survival. The alien savior. Alex's body felt weightless, like he was floating in a sea of warmth. The cold that had been gnawing at him moments ago was gone, replaced by a soothing heat that cradled him. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, he wondered if he had died. The ceiling above him was nothing like the inside of his ship. It shimmered, alive with veins of light running through smooth, translucent walls that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air was thick but breathable, carrying a faint, sweet scent that reminded him of spring blooms back on Earth. "Where am I?" Alex muttered, his voice weak. A movement caught his attention. He turned his head slowly, muscles stiff and uncooperative. Standing a few feet away was the same figure he had seen outside, tall, radiant, and undeniably alien. The being's translucent skin glowed faintly, its colors shifting like an aurora. Its eyes, large and golden, studied him with quiet curiosity. Alex tensed instinctively, his mind racing. This creature had saved him, but why? And what was it planning to do next? He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him back down. The being tilted its head, and Alex thought he saw something in its expression, not hostility, but concern. The creature stepped closer, its movements silent and fluid. Alex's pulse quickened as it reached out a long, slender hand, glowing faintly at the fingertips. He flinched, his instincts screaming to move, but his body refused to cooperate. The hand stopped just short of his chest, hovering there for a moment. Then, slowly, it pressed against his survival suit. Warmth flooded through him again, stronger this time, chasing away the lingering chill in his bones. Alex let out a shaky breath, his tension easing slightly. "Can you understand me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The being didn't respond with words. Instead, it lowered its hand and touched its own chest, where a soft glow began to form. Images filled Alex's mind. Visions of ice-covered landscapes, a village buried beneath snow, and others like this being, their forms glowing brightly as they moved together in harmony. Alex gasped, clutching his head. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, like a flood of emotions and memories all at once. He understood now. This creature was showing him its story, its life. "You're alone," Alex whispered, piecing the images together. The being's glow dimmed slightly, and it lowered its head. Alex's heart sank. He didn't know much about aliens, but he recognized loneliness when he saw it. Whatever had happened here, this being had lost its people, its home, just like he had lost his crew. The creature motioned toward a small, glowing orb on the ground. It looked like a piece of the crystal structure outside, smooth and faintly pulsating. The being lifted it carefully and held it out to Alex. "Is this for me?" Alex asked hesitantly. The being nodded, its golden eyes softening. Alex reached out, his hand trembling, and took the orb. It was warm to the touch, its glow intensifying slightly as he held it. "What is it?" He wondered aloud. Before he could get an answer, the ground beneath them trembled. A low, guttural sound echoed through the air, making Alex's blood run cold. The being turned sharply, its posture tense, and a sudden urgency filled the room. "What's happening?" Alex asked, his voice rising. The being didn't respond. Instead, it motioned for him to follow, its glowing form darting toward an opening in the wall. Alex stumbled to his feet, clutching the orb tightly as he staggered after it. They moved through a network of tunnels, the walls glowing faintly to light their path. The tremors grew stronger, accompanied by distant growls that made Alex's skin crawl. "What is that sound?" he asked, his breath coming in short gasps. The being glanced back at him, its eyes narrowing. It didn't need to speak for Alex to understand. It was a warning. Whatever was making that noise, it wasn't friendly. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, its walls lined with more of the glowing crystal. The being motioned for Alex to stay back as it approached the far wall. It placed its hand against the surface, and the crystals began to shift, forming a barrier over the tunnel they had just exited. Alex's heart pounded as the growls grew louder, closer. "What's out there?" he demanded, his voice shaking. The being turned to him, its expression calm but serious. It pointed to the orb in Alex's hands, then to the wall, and finally to Alex's chest. "You want me to protect this?" Alex guessed. The being nodded, its glow intensifying for a moment before dimming again. The growls stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. Alex held his breath, his knuckles white, as he clutched the orb. He looked at the being, searching its face for reassurance. Then, without warning, something slammed into the barrier, sending cracks spidering through the crystal. Alex stumbled back, his heart racing. The being stepped forward, its body glowing brighter than ever, ready to face whatever was on the other side. For the first time, Alex realized that this wasn't just about survival. This was about trust. Trust in a creature he didn't understand, in a world that wasn't his own. And in that moment, he made a silent promise. He wouldn't let this alien face the danger alone. The connection. The cavern was silent except for the faint hum of the glowing crystals lining the walls. Alex sat cross-legged on the smooth, warm floor, his back against the shimmering wall. Across from him, the alien sat in the same position, its translucent skin softly pulsing with light. They were staring at each other, not with hostility or fear, but with curiosity. Alex ran a hand through his hair, still damp from melted snow. "You saved me," he said quietly, his voice echoing slightly in the cavern. "I owe you my life, but I don't even know what you are." The alien tilted its head, golden eyes narrowing in thought. It raised one hand, its long, glowing fingers tracing a pattern in the air. Light followed the motion, forming a floating symbol that shimmered before dissolving. Alex blinked, trying to decipher the meaning. "You don't talk, do you?" he asked. The alien didn't answer, but its glow shifted, a soft blue light rippling across its skin. Alex thought it looked like sadness, or maybe frustration. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I guess I don't need to understand every word. You've already shown me plenty." The orb it had given him rested beside him, its steady glow matching the rhythm of the alien's light pulses. Alex picked it up, turning it over in his hands. "Is this some kind of communication device?" The alien pointed at the orb, then to Alex's chest. Its expression, if it could be called that, seemed insistent. "You want me to?" Alex paused, unsure. He held the orb closer, its warmth spreading through his fingertips. Slowly, he pressed it against his chest. The moment it touched him, a rush of sensations flooded his mind. He saw flashes of images, bright, vivid, and overwhelming. A vast ice plain stretching endlessly under a dark sky, towers of light rising from the ground, their surfaces alive with flowing energy. And then, a village of glowing beings like this one, their lights flickering in unison as they worked together, built together, lived together. The vision shifted. Darkness crept in, swallowing the village. The towers of light flickered and died, one by one. The beings scattered, their glowing forms dimming until only one remained. The alien. Alex gasped, pulling the orb away from his chest. His heart pounded as he stared at the creature in front of him. "You're the last one." The alien's light dimmed slightly, and it bowed its head. Alex felt a pang of sympathy deep in his chest. He knew what it meant to lose everything, to carry the weight of survival on your shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I can't imagine what that's like." The alien raised its head, meeting his gaze. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, and Alex felt an unspoken understanding pass between them. But their quiet moment didn't last. A low rumble echoed through the cavern, shaking the walls. Alex shot to his feet, the orb still clutched tightly in his hand. "What was that?" he asked, his voice tense. The alien stood as well, its glow intensifying. It pointed toward one of the tunnels leading out of the chamber, its posture stiff with alertness. Alex's stomach churned. He didn't need words to understand the warning. Something was coming. The rumble grew louder, accompanied by a guttural, almost mechanical growl. Alex's instincts kicked in. He grabbed the knife from his belt and scanned the room for anything that could be used as a weapon. The alien stepped in front of him, its arms outstretched as if shielding him. Its glow brightened, casting long shadows against the walls. "No," Alex said, stepping forward. "I'm not letting you do this alone." The alien glanced back at him, its golden eyes wide with surprise. Alex tightened his grip on the knife, his jaw set. "You saved me. Now it's my turn to help you." The growling sound turned into a deafening roar, and the tunnel ahead burst open, shards of ice flying through the air. Alex barely had time to react before a massive creature lunged into the chamber. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Towering and skeletal, its body covered in jagged, frost-covered armor. Its eyes glowed an icy blue, and its breath came out in steaming clouds. The alien stepped forward, its glow intensifying into a fiery orange. It raised both hands, and the crystals in the walls responded, their light flaring brightly. The creature snarled, recoiling slightly, but it wasn't deterred. Alex's heart pounded as he moved to the alien's side. "I hope you have a plan," he muttered. The alien didn't respond, but its light shifted again, pulsing in a pattern that Alex almost recognized. He didn't have time to think about it. The creature charged, and the fight for their lives began. The hunt. The icy wasteland stretched endlessly in every direction, its silence broken only by the crunch of snow beneath Alex's boots. The alien, Sura, as Alex had decided to call her, moved effortlessly ahead, her translucent form glowing faintly in the dim light of the twin moons. Alex struggled to keep up, his breath clouding the air as the bitter cold seeped through the cracks in his patched-up survival suit. Sura stopped suddenly, her head tilting as if listening to something Alex couldn't hear. She raised a hand, motioning for him to stay still. Her glow dimmed slightly, and Alex instinctively crouched behind a jagged rock. "What is it?" he whispered, though he knew Sura wouldn't respond with words. Instead, she pointed toward the horizon, where the faint outline of Alex's crashed ship was barely visible against the snow. The wreckage looked closer now, but between them, and it was something far worse. A low, guttural growl echoed across the icy plains, and Alex's blood ran cold. Sura turned to him, her golden eyes narrowing with urgency. She mimed a crouching motion, then pointed toward the ship again. Alex understood. They couldn't afford to be spotted. He tightened his grip on the makeshift spear Sura had fashioned for him from a shard of crystal and a piece of his broken equipment. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. As they moved closer to the ship, Alex's heart pounded in his chest. The growling sound grew louder, accompanied by the unmistakable crunch of heavy footsteps in the snow. And then he saw it. The ice stalker. It was massive, its skeletal body covered in frost-encrusted armor that shimmered in the moonlight. Its glowing blue eyes scanned the horizon as it sniffed the air, steam billowing from its nostrils. The creature moved with a predatory grace, each step deliberate and calculated. Alex froze, every instinct screaming at him to run, but Sira placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was warm and grounding, and he forced himself to stay still. The ice stalker prowled closer, its snout twitching as it caught their scent. Sira stepped in front of Alex, her glow intensifying to a fiery orange. The creature snarled, its glowing eyes locking onto them. Alex's grip tightened on his spear. "This is bad," he muttered under his breath. Sira raised both hands, and the crystals embedded in the ground around them began to pulse with light. The ice stalker hesitated, its head lowering as it growled again, this time more cautiously. Alex watched in awe as Sira manipulated the energy from the crystals, creating a barrier of shimmering light between them and the creature. But he could see the strain on her face, or at least what he interpreted as strain. Her glow flickered slightly, and her movements slowed. The ice stalker wasn't backing down. It roared, charging straight at the barrier. The ground shook under its massive weight, and the barrier shattered into shards of light that dissolved into the air. "Move," Alex shouted, grabbing Sira's arm and pulling her aside just as the creature's claws slammed into the ground where they had been standing. They sprinted toward the wreckage, the ice stalker hot on their heels. Alex's lungs burned, and his legs felt like lead, but he refused to stop. Sira glanced back, her glow dimming further. She couldn't keep this up much longer. As they reached the ship, Alex spotted a jagged piece of metal sticking out of the snow. An idea struck him, reckless, but it was all he had. "Sira, distract it," he yelled, hoping she would understand. She hesitated for a moment before nodding. Turning back to face the creature, she raised her hands again, her glow flaring brighter than ever. The ice stalker roared, its attention locked onto her. Alex darted to the piece of metal, wrenching it free with all his strength. It was sharp and heavy, coated in frost. Perfect. "Hey, over here," he shouted, waving the makeshift blade. The ice stalker turned its massive head toward him, its glowing eyes narrowing. It charged. Alex waited until the last possible second before diving out of the way, slamming the metal shard into the creature's exposed flank as it barreled past. The ice stalker howled in pain, its movements growing erratic as it turned to face him again. Before it could lunge, Sira stepped forward, her glow shifting to a brilliant white. The ground beneath the creature cracked and splintered, jagged shards of crystal erupting from the snow and piercing its armored body. The ice stalker let out one final, deafening roar before collapsing in a heap, its glowing eyes dimming as the life drained from it. Alex dropped to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked at Sira, who was swaying on her feet, her glow flickering like a dying flame. "You did it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We did it." Sira turned to him, her golden eyes softening. She extended a hand, and Alex took it, her warmth seeping into his frozen fingers. For the first time since the crash, Alex felt a glimmer of hope. They had survived the hunt. But he knew this was only the beginning. There were more dangers ahead, and if they wanted to make it off this planet alive, they would have to face them together. A glimmer of hope. The cavern stretched into silence as Alex sat on the cold, metallic floor of his wrecked ship's remains. The faint glow of the alien orb in his hands pulsed steadily, casting eerie patterns on the shattered control panels around him. Outside, the icy winds howled relentlessly, their cries muffled by the walls of the ship. Beside him, Sira stood motionless, her translucent form dimmer than before, the glow of her skin pulsing faintly as if conserving energy. "This thing better work," Alex muttered under his breath, holding up the salvaged distress beacon. The once sleek piece of human technology was now a Frankenstein's monster of wires, broken panels, and alien crystal shards. He glanced at Sira, who watched him with those unblinking golden eyes. "You're sure this crystal can power it?" Sira tilted her head, raising a hand to point at the orb in his hands. A surge of warmth flowed through his fingertips, and the beacon hummed faintly to life. Alex's eyes widened. "Well, that's something," he said, his voice tinged with hope. "Now let's see if I can boost the range." Sira crouched beside him, her long fingers tracing the wires with a curious precision. Though she didn't speak, her movements carried an intelligence that amazed Alex. It was as if she understood the mechanics better than he did. The quiet moment was interrupted by a low rumble that sent vibrations through the ship's frame. Alex froze, his eyes darting to the gaping hole in the side of the wreckage. "Tell me that's just the wind," he whispered. Sira's glow intensified, and she stood, her posture rigid. She turned toward the opening, her golden eyes narrowing. The rumble grew louder, accompanied by a guttural growl that Alex knew all too well. "The ice beasts," he muttered, grabbing the knife strapped to his belt. His pulse quickened as he scanned the shadows outside. Sira stepped forward, her glow flaring brighter. She raised a hand, and the crystals embedded in the ship's walls began to shimmer in response. Alex felt a pang of guilt as he watched her. She was already weakened from their last encounter with the predators, and now she was putting herself in danger again. "Sira, wait," he said, stepping beside her. "We don't have to fight them. If the beacon works, help could be on the way. We just need to hold out." Sira glanced at him, her golden eyes softening for a moment. Then she pointed at the beacon and gestured toward the open plains beyond the ship. "You're saying the signal will attract them?" Alex guessed. His stomach sank. Of course, the ice beasts would sense the energy spike. The beacon might save them, but it would also bring danger straight to their doorstep. Before Alex could respond, a piercing roar echoed through the night, followed by the heavy crunch of snow. The beasts were close. "All right," Alex muttered, gripping his knife tighter. "We need a plan." Sira placed a hand on his shoulder, her warmth radiating through his suit. She pointed at the crystals around them, then at the beacon. "You want to use the beacon as bait?" Alex asked, his brow furrowing. Sira nodded, her glow flickering. Alex hesitated. It was a risky plan, but it might be their only shot. The beacon would draw the beasts, and if Sira could manipulate the crystals to create a trap. "Okay," he said, nodding. "Let's do it." Together, they worked quickly. Alex adjusted the beacon's settings, increasing the energy output to create a stronger signal. Sira moved to the walls, her hands gliding over the crystals as they began to shift and grow, forming sharp, jagged structures around the wreckage. The first beast appeared moments later, its skeletal form emerging from the shadows. It was even larger than the one they had faced before, its frost-covered armor glinting in the moonlight. Its glowing blue eyes locked onto the beacon, and it let out a deafening roar. Alex's heart pounded as two more beasts emerged from the darkness, their massive forms circling the wreckage. "You didn't say there'd be a pack," he muttered, glancing at Sira. Sira's glow intensified as she raised both hands. The crystals around the ship pulsed with light, and the ground began to tremble. The beasts hesitated, growling low as they eyed the glowing trap. "Come on," Alex whispered, gripping his knife. "Just a little closer." The lead beast lunged first, its massive claws slamming into the ground as it charged toward the beacon. Sira's hands moved in a fluid motion, and the crystals responded instantly, shooting upward to form a jagged barrier. The beast crashed into the wall of crystals, its roar of pain echoing through the night. The other two beasts hesitated, their glowing eyes scanning the trap. "Now's our chance," Alex shouted, running toward the beacon. He grabbed it and quickly adjusted the settings, redirecting the energy output toward the remaining beasts. The second beast lunged, but Xira was ready. She thrust her hands forward, and a wave of heat erupted from the crystals, melting the snow beneath the creature's feet. It stumbled, its claws scrabbling for purchase, before collapsing into the icy sludge. The third beast snarled, backing away from the glowing trap. It turned and flowed into the darkness, its roars fading into the distance. Alex collapsed to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Did we do it?" he asked, looking at Xira. Xira's glow dimmed as she knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her golden eyes met his, and for the first time since the crash, Alex felt a spark of hope. The beacon's steady hum filled the silence, its signal cutting through the void. Somewhere out there, help would come. Until then, they would survive. Together, the final stand. The icy plains were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that carried weight, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Alex's pulse pounded in his ears, each beat a reminder of how close they were to the edge of survival. Beside him, Xira stood motionless, her translucent form glowing faintly against the backdrop of the wrecked ship. The distress beacon hummed steadily, sending its signal into the void of space. It was a lifeline, a desperate cry for help, but it had also become a beacon for something far less friendly. Alex tightened his grip on the jagged piece of metal he had fashioned into a weapon. The air was electric with tension. And then it came. The ice stalker appeared first, a massive skeletal beast covered in frost-encrusted armor, its glowing blue eyes locked onto the ship. Behind it, shadows moved, and Alex's stomach churned. There wasn't just one this time. There was an entire pack. Of course, Alex muttered under his breath, glancing at Xira. It's never just one, is it? Xira didn't respond. Her golden eyes were fixed on the beasts, her glow intensifying as she stepped forward. The crystals embedded in the ground around the ship began to shimmer, responding to her energy. The lead ice stalker let out a guttural roar, its breath forming clouds of frost in the freezing air. It charged, its massive claws tearing through the snow with terrifying speed. "Xira!" Alex shouted, but she was already moving. She raised her hands, and the crystals erupted from the ground, forming a jagged barrier in the creature's path. The ice stalker collided with it, the impact sending shards of glowing crystal flying in all directions. It howled in pain but didn't stop. Its claws tore through the barrier, shattering it piece by piece. "Not good," Alex muttered, gripping his weapon tightly. He turned to Xira, who was visibly straining, her glow flickering like a dying flame. "You can't keep this up." Xira glanced at him, her eyes filled with a determination that Alex couldn't ignore. She gestured toward the beacon, then toward the pack of beasts. "You want me to lure them away?" Alex asked, his voice rising in disbelief. "Are you crazy? They'll tear me apart." Another roar cut through the air as the rest of the pack charged, their massive forms barreling toward the ship. Alex's heart raced. There was no time to argue. "Fine," he shouted, grabbing the beacon. "But if I die, I'm blaming you." He sprinted away from the wreckage, the beacon's hum growing louder as he adjusted its frequency. The ice stalkers turned, their glowing eyes locking onto him. "Come on, you ugly bastards," Alex yelled, waving the beacon in the air. "You want this? Come and get it." The beasts roared in unison, their massive claws digging into the snow as they gave chase. Alex ran as fast as he could, his breath coming in short, freezing gasps. He could feel the ground shaking beneath him as the creatures closed in. Behind him, Xira raised her hands again, her glow intensifying to a blinding white. The crystals around the ship pulsed with energy, forming a massive ring of jagged spikes. "Just a little further," Alex muttered to himself, glancing over his shoulder. The lead ice stalker was only a few steps behind him now, its skeletal jaws snapping hungrily. He reached the edge of the crystal ring and turned sharply, throwing the beacon into the center of the trap. The beasts lunged for it, their massive forms crashing into the circle. "Now, Xera," Alex shouted. Xera thrust her hands forward, and the crystals erupted with energy. A blinding light filled the air, and a shockwave of heat slammed into Alex, knocking him off his feet. He landed hard on the snow, gasping for breath as the light began to fade. When he looked up, the beasts were gone. The ring of crystals stood tall, their jagged edges glowing faintly in the aftermath of the blast. Alex staggered to his feet, his legs shaking. "We did it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But his relief was short-lived. He turned to find Xera collapsed on the ground, her glow dim and flickering. "No, no, no," Alex muttered, running to her side. He knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're not doing this to me. Come on, Xera. Stay with me." Xera opened her eyes weakly, her golden gaze meeting his. She raised a trembling hand, pointing toward the beacon. "What?" Alex asked, his voice breaking. "The beacon worked. Help's on the way. You just have to hold on." Xera shook her head, her glow fading further. She reached out and touched Alex's chest, a surge of warmth flowing through him. Images flooded his mind, visions of her people, her world, and her final wish, to ensure Alex survived. Tears stung Alex's eyes as he shook his head. "No, I'm not leaving you here." The distant hum of an approaching ship cut through the silence, and Alex's heart leaped. Help had arrived. But Xera's glow was fading fast. She smiled faintly, her golden eyes closing as her light dimmed to nothing. "No," Alex shouted, his voice cracking. The rescue team arrived moments later, pulling Alex to safety. But as the ship lifted off the frozen planet, Alex stared out the window, clutching the orb Xera had given him. She had saved his life, not once but over and over again. And now he carried her light with him, a reminder of the alien warmth that had given him hope when all seemed lost. Saved by warmth. The rescue ship's engines hummed softly, a sound that should have brought Alex comfort. Yet, as he sat by the observation window, staring at the icy planet shrinking below, his chest felt hollow. The orb Xera had given him pulsed faintly in his hands, its warmth a reminder of what he had lost. The rescue crew bustled around him, patching his wounds and running diagnostics, but their words barely registered. All he could think about was Xera, the alien who had saved his life, the being who had sacrificed everything so he could survive. A soft knock on the metal wall pulled him from his thoughts. A young medic stood there, holding a data pad. Her expression was cautious, like she wasn't sure how to approach him. "Captain Reed," she said softly, "we've reviewed your distress signal logs. The energy readings, they're unlike anything we've seen before." Alex looked up at her, his tired eyes narrowing. "That's because it wasn't just my signal," he said, holding up the orb. "This helped me send it. But it's more than that. It's someone's legacy." The medic frowned slightly, stepping closer. "Legacy." Alex sighed, turning the orb over in his hands. Her name was Xera. At least, that's what I called her. She wasn't human, but she saved me, over and over. This orb, it's all that's left of her people. The medic's eyes widened, her gaze fixed on the glowing artifact. "Her people? You mean there's intelligent life down there?" "Not anymore," Alex said bitterly, his grip tightening on the orb. "She was the last. And now..." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The medic hesitated, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "If there's anything we can do." "Just make sure this survives," Alex interrupted, his voice firm. "Her story deserves to be told." The medic nodded and stepped away, leaving Alex alone with his thoughts. As the ship soared through the void, Alex replayed the final moments on the planet in his mind. Xera's light had dimmed, her form collapsing in his arms as the rescue team arrived. She had given everything, her strength, her warmth, to protect him. And now she was gone. Alex stared at the orb, its glow faint but steady. He didn't fully understand its power, but he felt a connection to it, like a piece of Syrah still lingered within. "Why?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why did you save me?" The orb pulsed softly in response, as if answering his question. Warmth radiated from it, spreading through Alex's chest. He closed his eyes, and for a brief moment, he saw her again, not as she had been in her final moments, but as she was in life. She stood tall and radiant, her golden eyes filled with kindness. Around her, a vision of her world appeared. Towering crystalline cities glowing softly against the icy plains, her people moving in harmony, their lights flickering in unison like a symphony of stars. Then, darkness crept in, swallowing the vision. Xura stood alone, her light dimming as her world fell apart. Yet even in the face of despair, she reached out, first to her people, and then to Alex. Tears streamed down Alex's face as the vision faded. The orb's warmth lingered, a quiet reassurance. "You didn't just save me," he murmured. "You gave me hope. You showed me what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself." Hours later, the rescue ship docked at a massive orbital station. Alex stepped out, the orb clutched tightly in his hands. The station's artificial lights were bright and sterile, a stark contrast to the soft, natural glow of Syrah's world. A representative from the Galactic Exploration Council approached him, their expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Captain Reed," they said, extending a hand. "We've reviewed your initial report. What you've discovered could change everything." Alex shook their hand firmly. "It already has." The representative gestured toward a secure lab. "We'd like to study the artifact you brought back. Its energy readings are unprecedented." Alex hesitated, his grip tightening on the orb. For a moment, he considered refusing. But then he thought of Syrah, her final wish, the trust she had placed in him. "You can study it," he said finally, "but only under one condition. Her story gets told. The galaxy needs to know what she did, who she was. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a savior." The representative nodded solemnly. "We'll make sure of it." As Alex handed over the orb, he felt a pang of loss, but also a sense of purpose. Xura's light would live on, not just in the orb, but in the story he carried with him. Later, as he sat alone in his quarters, Alex stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Syrah's world lay silent and empty, but her legacy was alive. He placed a hand over his chest, where he could still feel the warmth she had left behind. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." And for the first time since the crash, Alex allowed himself to smile. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a torchbearer, carrying the light of a life that had changed his own forever.